What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of The Girl Who Talks Sports, the podcast where we talk sports and other girly things. I am Sam Cardona, and thank you guys so much for tuning in this week. We went on a bit of a hiatus last week. Took a break, just took a week to kind of decompress, not have to worry about it. Not that I don't love podcasting. I think it's the most fun I ever had, but every once in a while you just need a break, a mental health week, and it was good. And now I'm back. I'm better than ever. I'm ready to take on the NFL draft next week. It's going to be great. We have loads of stuff that's going on next week for the NFL draft. On the night of the NFL draft, during the draft, me and Andy Hopper, host of the Brew Party podcast, as well as the Big Blue Avenue guys, Tom Scavetta, Hank and Dichter, and a bunch of other guests, are going to be doing a live stream of the draft. So make sure that you check that out. It'll be on Andy's channel, the Brew Party on Facebook Live, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. So make sure that you guys check that out on draft night. First round of the draft, Thursday, 8 p.m. We will be live. So if you want to hear live reactions to the draft, make sure that you check that out. And then on Friday, I'm not entirely sure when that will be out, but I will be doing another video with Ashley Wilson from Her Sports Convo, who has been on the show twice now. I'm sure that you guys remember her. And we are going to be doing a fashion review of the NFL draft along with our girl Sporty Jordy. And it's going to be a ton of fun. And then now I am so excited to announce, oh my God, the YouTube channel has officially hit 100 subscribers. Oh my God, I even botched up my own exciting news. The YouTube channel hit 100 subscribers. So because of that, we are going to put out a very fun, very special video with Sporty Jordy, Jordan Arard Coupe. We have a whole plan out, so that will be our very special 100 subscriber video that you guys get in terms of extra content for subscribing to the YouTube channel. Thank you guys so, so much. Never in my life would I think I'd have 100 YouTube subscribers, so I really, really appreciate it. All right, so that is my spiel. And we haven't even gotten to our plugs, but this is a really great show this week. We had Annie O'Donnell, Annie OD from OD on Sports podcast. She's also on the radio in Orange County in California. Really fantastic guest. I'm so excited for you guys to hear our interview because it was great. We talked about how Annie got started and everything. Basically a bunch of other stories that went down, this European Super League that's everyone's talking about. We talked about that. We talked about Julian Edelman and the Hall of Fame discussion, which I know is a little late, but it is what it is. We didn't have a podcast episode last week. And then we go on a Marvel spiel. So if you guys like Marvel, totally just wait till the end of the interview because we go in on the Marvel movies and the TV shows. It's fantastic. I really, really enjoyed talking to Annie. So before we get into all that, guys, don't forget to subscribe on all podcasting platforms. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you get your podcasts from. Please make sure to subscribe and leave a review. Reviews are so, so, so helpful to the podcast, so please make sure that you do that. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Now that we've reached 100 subscribers, next on the list is 200 subscribers. So please make sure to tell your friends, tell your family, tell your grandma, tell everybody to subscribe to the YouTube channel so that we can keep racking up those subscribers. And make sure that you turn on notifications to make sure that you get notified every time you upload a new video, every time I upload a new video. I'm just so excited right now that I can't even talk. And don't forget to also comment, share on the video that you're watching right now if you're watching it on the YouTube channel. And finally, guys, don't forget to follow us on social media at TGWTS Podcast on both Instagram and on Twitter. So there we go. Those are our plugs. This is a long, long intro. Before we get into our interview with Annie OD, let's get just a quick little affiliate read from Instacart. Imagine it was possible that local fresh groceries could be delivered right to your front door. You would have so much free time, you could listen to more of The Girl Who Talks Sports. Instacart gives you unlimited grocery delivery for one low monthly fee. Better than what those other guys who nickel and dime you do whenever you use their app. Instacart can deliver to your front door in as little as 1 hour. You're not even tied down to one store. You can shop multiple stores, find deals in your area to save some money, and shoppers hand select your items based on your preferences. So don't worry, they'll keep your gentle items like your eggs safe too. To start your 14-day free trial, click the link in the show notes so Instacart knows that you were sent by me, the girl who talks sports. And this also helps to support our show. Instacart. Never step foot in a grocery store again. Okay, everyone. So, without further ado, let's get into our interview with Annie O'Donnell of the OD on Sports podcast. All right, everyone. So this week we are joined by Annie OD, the host of OD on Sports. She's also a radio host from sunny San Diego, California. Annie, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm like super stoked to talk to you. We've been kind of going back and forth on Instagram and on Twitter and things like that. So I was like so excited that you agreed to come on here. And I'm really excited to like learn more about how you got started in sports and everything. So I kind of want to start there. I've been doing a lot of origin stories of podcasters lately on my show. So, where did it become in your brain that you're like, okay, this is what I want to do? And then like, how did you get started?
That's a good story. I do want to say absolutely loved. We were sharing pictures. I tweeted something about like old outfits that we wore growing up to sporting events, and I just look back at some of my old ones, and I really appreciate I died at the Yankees logo done in eyeliner. Just so
awful. So bad. Bad.
It's big main character energy though. You really wanted to. I loved it.
Thank you.
Like, those little things like growing up where you think you're so cool and you're like, like, I think I commented, I was like, I really rolled up to Dodger Stadium feeling like I was going to pull Clayton Kershaw from the top deck.
Right. Yeah.
All those things. But I digress. How I got started. So I've been a lifelong sports fan. I knew very early on that I wanted to do something in sports. So when I went to school, I started in sports marketing, thinking I wanted to work for a team. And after a couple internships, I really wasn't feeling it. Just knew, I was like, I don't really want to do this. Plus the money is basically nothing. So I said, okay, let's figure something else out. So when I graduated, I went into business, did an entry-level job in Chicago. And then it eventually took me to New York City, where I knew I wanted to be on the East Coast. I went to school in Pittsburgh, so I loved it there.
Right.
So lived in New York for 3 years, and my job was absolutely miserable. I loved New York, loved living there, but when you hate your job, it just it drains you emotionally, everything. And I knew, I was like, I cannot continue to live like this. Like, this is not it. Life's too short to do something that you hate. And I had a friend ask me, she said, well, if you could do anything, don't worry about the money, what would it be? I was like, talk sports. It's literally my favorite thing to do. Like, when all the cities I've moved in, like, I kind of reference it in Mean Girls when Katie says like she loves math because it's the same in every country. I was like, yo, when you move places and you talk sports, like, it's that universal love language. If you can talk football, hockey, baseball, no matter what major city you go to, you're gonna find people there that share those similar interests. So, and that was something I truly love doing. I love making those connections with people. And I was like, well, where do I start? I don't have a journalism degree. And this was back, I want to say I was 25 at the time. So I was like, well, I don't have that journalism degree. Like, people won't even look at me. Like, I don't have the background or anything. And that's when I kind of toyed around with the idea of a podcast to just air out what I wanted to air out and talk about what I wanted to talk about. I went to in the city, they have, well, actually you're from New York, so you probably know, they have the General Assembly classes in Flatiron where they just have a whole ton of like random, they're kind of like YMCA classes where you can learn like different skills. And they had one for podcasting, and because I had no idea what I was doing. So it was like a night class and learned everything. And I was like, maybe I could make this work. And I want to say that was early 2019. And then I was still working the dead end job at the time. And I just really couldn't muster up the courage to start the podcast and go for it. And I kind of attribute that now, looking back, I think about it. And when you are told like day in and day out that you're not good enough, you're not worthy, you're not working hard enough, like no matter how you feel about yourself, if you're told it enough, you start to believe it. So I was really in a bad emotional place at that time. But the universe stepped in. There was cost cutting and my job was affected in that summer. So I was given, and something told me it was going to be the best thing for me. So I said, well, I've got a clean slate right now. What do I want to do with it? And applied for some sports jobs, but I knew I didn't want to work for a team though. Like, so I just kind of knew that. And I believe in the universe. I believe in signs, everything happening for a reason. And something told me that was not the path for me. So none of those panned out. And at that point in time, I said, you know what? The podcast was always in the back of my mind. I was like, just go for it. See what happens. What's the worst thing that happens? Nobody listens. Okay. And it's at that point, I feel like living in New York too, there's so many people around living their life, and there's that grind of chasing your dream, doing what you want to do,
right?
Where the fear of what people think of you really doesn't exist. And if you have that fear in New York, you're not going to make it very far. Like, look, you go on the subway and people are doing just the randomest stuff ever, and nobody bats an eye. And it really makes you think like, okay, like people really don't care about you or what you're doing the way that you think you do. Like they're really, it's like one of those things where like we constantly think, oh my God, they think this about me. Like they're looking at me this way, and they're not. Like everyone's the main character in their own story. They're busy with their own stuff.
Right.
But yeah, launched the podcast November 19th of 2019 and absolutely loved it. It was just the ability to like structure your own show, talk about what you want to talk about, whether it's topics, current events, or, just fun fan debates that are timeless. And then COVID hit, obviously. And when sports is shut off, I was kind of like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
What am I going to talk about? And funny enough, between free agency, between the mess of the MLB and MLBPA negotiations, and then just kind of fun topics that I was able to create, I had content to talk about, even with no games on. And I think that's one of the coolest things about sports. And even though, the off season is the off season, but there's always something to talk about.
Oh yeah.
And so kept that up all through COVID, which also got me into like experimenting on TikTok, which I'm still kind of figuring out, but doing a lot of sports themed stuff there. And it was later in 2019. And, I was doing the podcast for a bit, coming up on my 1-year anniversary of the podcast, which I mean, you run a podcast by yourself. So and I tell people all the time, it's hard. It is so hard, especially doing it by yourself. Like, that's not to take away from anybody else that has a co-host or two, but doing it solo is so difficult. Everything from editing, planning a show, because you don't people think you just turn on the microphone and start talking and there's no planning, no nothing. I'm like, no, it doesn't really work like that. And only like other solo podcasters are like, hey, like we get the struggle. Like, so that's why when like the negative reviews come in and like people that just don't know how much work goes into it, I feel like there's like that respect amongst podcasters for anybody that does their own thing. Yeah. But I was finally thinking, okay, like what's next? What do I want to do more of this? And one day I was tweeting. It was I forget what week it was, and I hate that I can't remember, but it was the Browns-Ravens game. Big one with Lamar leaving with cramps apparently.
Monday night game.
Coming back. Yeah.
Yes, remember.
I was live tweeting that because we'll go on a tangent here a little bit. I grew up a San Diego Chargers fan. Always loved football, but when the Chargers left San Diego, thanks to Dean Spanos, I said, nope, I'm not following him to LA, even though I am an LA sports fan for the most part. But it's the principle of it. It was Dean Spanos. I was like, I'm not supporting this. I can't. Which being a Chargers fan was just painful and still is painful, actually.
Right.
But so I said, I'm going to be a free agent. I'm just going to play fantasy. And this past year, a fantasy football creator by the name of Lawrence Jackson, who's also called the Fantasy Football Lord, who's an amazing guy. So if anyone's into fantasy football, definitely check him out. Reached out to me. He said, hey, I listened to your stuff, but this free agent fan thing, we got to end that. Let's pick you a team. And I said, okay, I mean, worst comes to worst. All right, why not? So we did a game and I ended up with the Baltimore Ravens, which worked out pretty well. I'm a big Lamar Jackson fan. I don't know if you can see the prayer candle back there, but my prized possession. But anyway, I was live tweeting that game and that game was insane. And one of my followers, well, someone who had followed me was a producer and an on-air host at Sportsnet, which is one of the big media companies up in Canada, and said, hey, do you want to come on and talk about the game? I said, oh, sure, why not? And that was my first radio gig. And I was terrified, but I had so much fun. And I messaged them after saying, hey, like, I love to do other sports too, would love to come back. And I've been back a lot recently. So I'm kind of a frequent guest over there and I absolutely love it. And leading into and kind of going back to TikTok a little bit, which I just use to kind of mess around and have a good time. But I had someone reach out to me and saying, hey, saw your TikTok. I'm a huge Dodgers fan, as I stated, going to Dodger Stadium as a kid. But like ranting about the Dodgers or like fun, using trending sounds to relate to sports somehow. And it said, hey, we've got an opening for a co-host up at a show in Orange County. Would love to have you come in, give it a try. I said, you know what? Why not? I'll take any free radio time, any radio time where I can get more practice. I'll take it. So I've been doing that. That's only been about a month now. That's a new venture, but yeah, it's been a year and a half, a little bit, I want to say, yeah, about a year and a half now. And not too long of a time, but certainly making the most of it. And took a little bit to get here. Obviously lots of, I want to say a very unconventional journey, but what I'm learning the more I meet people is no one really has the conventional path when it comes to sports media, especially nowadays with social media being a thing and being like, you can launch your own podcast. You don't need to intern places or have a journalism degree to make it in sports media. And that was the one thing that always got me was on any job application, you would see like degree in journalism. I was like, yo, I know fans like in sports bars that can talk better sports than the guys sitting at the desk or people that are in journalism, which is no disrespect to anybody that's followed that path. But I just feel like it's so excessive in an industry where there's so many barriers, there's ways around it. And it's not just because you didn't major in something, just because you didn't get internships when you were 18 to 22, it shouldn't impact what you want to do.
Right. Absolutely. And the thing is that it's funny, we have like a backwards kind of story because I started in radio and progressed to podcasting. I had a radio show when I was in college. And I mean, the airwaves were not large. They made it to like 10 people. Like that was it. It was not a big deal. But after I graduated from college, I was like, well, I don't have airwaves anymore. So that's when I started the podcast. So it's funny, we have like an opposite kind of thing here. But that's awesome though. That is so fun. And so like, is your podcast like, do you find that podcasting and radio are different? Because I know that podcasting for me is a completely different entity than when you go on the radio. Do you feel like that's kind of the same thing?
Absolutely. And I think a big part of that is also the kind of the different personalities you have coming into it. And then on podcasting, you have the flexibility of, I don't want to necessarily call it a script because reading something word by word is not how it goes, but you can kind of structure it and plan it as you go. Whereas radio, I mean, it kind of feels like improv at that point. Or like when I do like guest appearances on radio, like there's times I don't know the topic or the questions. So I kind of have to just be ready and wing it off the spot. And most of the time I do okay. But then there's times where like you're asked just a question out of left field and you're like, well, you just try to like, you find a string. That's one thing with like a take or something, which I've found is like, you find that one thing that you can talk about and just kind of run with it. But it is different. But it's a good different, I feel like. And I think anybody that wants to do either, whether it's radio or podcasting, getting good time in both is very good. Getting more comfortable in front of a microphone, I think, is essential for anybody. And I forget who I was talking to about it yesterday, but there's so many people in sports that are so smart, know what they're talking about, know the game, but when they get in front of a camera or a microphone, it is just nothing. And that's something where like part of that you can't teach, that someone's energy. You can't teach someone to have that charisma, that energy, but you can work on, getting more comfortable. And then from there, kind of the rest flows. But I mean, it's been fun for the most part, but yeah, definitely different paths, different experiences for sure.
Yeah. And jumping back to the journalism degree part, like I can say firsthand, I have a journalism minor. I could have gone without it. I didn't really need to do what like I'm doing right now. I didn't learn anything in that minor that had anything to do with like media and stuff. It was all like written things.
Right.
Like, that's usually what like the journalism thing is. It's like you go to like write for a paper or for a blog or like something along those lines. So it's, people be like, you need a journalism degree. Like you really don't. You can go without it if you really wanted to. But yeah, it's definitely difficult and not everyone can do it. I mean, we've seen pro athletes who become like broadcasters. I mean, I could think off the top of my head, Jason Witten on Monday Night Football on ESPN doing horrible, just absolute garbage, wearing suits that were way too tight for him too. Like it was not a good look. And then you have like Tony Romo on the other end, who's like a savant, basically. Like he was born for this. Like it was like he should have never even been on the Cowboys. It was just like a totally different Tony Romo. But yeah, it's an interesting thing in between radio, podcasting. It's totally different and not everyone can do it, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing, but some people do like just not know how to deal with a camera or a microphone or things like that. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah,
But
writing,
go ahead.
I was gonna say writing's not exactly my thing. I've gotten a couple like some like football sites have reached out and been like, hey, we would love for you to write for us, cover the Ravens. I'm like, I don't like writing. I took a sports and media. You had to take sports and media in my major in college, and writing was just, I mean, I can be a good writer if I want to, but I would much rather be talking. I would much rather be face to face with somebody. I mean, that's what I love the most. Like my favorite place to talk sports is like either at a game next to somebody or like on a bar stool, in my favorite bar at a team's bar. Like that's where you feel the passion. That's where you feed off of that energy of a fan base. And that's what I love. And that's, I think, one of my favorite things about sports is how it brings people together. Not to say that people don't do that through their writing. There's many talented writers that could do that. Just not my avenue, just not my media outlet of choice.
And that's totally fine. That is totally fine. But I want to talk about like your team. So you kind of mentioned how you became a Baltimore Ravens fan. I was curious about that.
Yeah.
But so like what, if you had to pick like a favorite team of the ones you root for, or like your favorite sport, what would you pick?
Ooh, those are two different answers, which is very funny.
That's
my favorite sport would be hockey for sure. That's probably that's the sport I know like the back of my hand. I love it. I grew up in a huge hockey family. I have 4 brothers, no sisters. My dad grew up playing hockey. My dad's from Long Island, so grew up with an East Coast family. So
nice.
Living in San Diego, all of us were put on skates. It's just something my father instilled in all of us. So I love the beautiful game. So that would be my favorite sport to cover. My favorite team, however, would be the Los Angeles Dodgers. That's another thing I inherited from my dad. He grew up a Brooklyn Dodgers fan. So when he's a Marine. So when he was stationed out in Camp Pendleton, the Dodgers they're not the closest MLB team. That's obviously the San Diego Padres, who were very good, mind you, back when I was growing up in the 90s. But him being a Dodgers fan and Dodger Stadium, not too far, no question. There was no competition for who my brothers and I would root for. So it's now finally tasting the fruits of my, there's been throughout my childhood and early teens growing up, being a Dodgers fan was pretty painful. And now obviously brighter days are here. So it's been fun. And I talk about it a lot on my show where I say, being a sports fan, you need the balance of powers. Not everyone can be like Boston where New England, which I know you're from New York. So probably Boston sports are not your favorite.
Not my thing.
But not everybody can have like the ring, the title town, or all those, like the kid you ever see that meme with the kid I forget which parade it was. I think it was the Patriots parade where he's got champs parades that I've been to. And it's like 10. And meanwhile, there's poor people that haven't even been to one and they're grown and got their own kids. It's just, but you need the teams that are really good. So you experience that joy, but you also need the teams that keep you humble, keep you to the ground. You need to be a well-rounded sports fan, I think. So I'm a Lakers fan as well, so that it's been a pretty good year for us as well. But I am an Anaheim Ducks fan currently, and things are not so great. So right when you experience like the height of it, you get 2 championships in a month, you get a team that is botching their rebuild in the bottom of the standings. And it's just, that's the circle of life. It's, I say, one of my friends actually says it best. He says, being a sports fan is the willingness to ride the roller coaster. There's going to be ups, downs, the loops, the corkscrews. There are highs, but then you're going to experience the lows of the lows. Rebuilds are inevitable. So it's all part of the sports fan experience. It's a crazy, beautiful, emotional life, but wouldn't change the highs. The good days make the bad days worth it, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a Yankee fan, and we are just doing I think this is the worst start we've ever had since like 1997, and like it's just we're struggling for real right now.
The good thing is that it's only April, so there's a lot of baseball left to play, and that's why everyone's like high on the Dodgers right now, which granted they've been playing awesome, but I was like, it's only April. It's a long season. It's I'm excited about the start, but it's all about staying consistent, keeping it up, because you see teams fizzle out, come the All-Star break. They've had a great first half, and then teams turn it up the second half, make deep postseason runs. It's a fun thing. I think I forget what quote this movie's from. It's from everyone. Have you ever seen that animated movie, Everyone's Hero?
No.
Where I forget how it was, but someone stole, it's like Babe Ruth. It's kids from Chicago, and someone steals Babe Ruth's bat, and they think it's his dad, who's like the locker room equipment manager, and he gets fired. So the kids like seeks out to go and return the bat. No, he's from New York. Excuse me. He's from New York, and he takes the train and like travels to Chicago to return Babe's bat to him. And the one thing that Babe Ruth, whoever plays Babe Ruth in that movie, says, hey, it's baseball, like anything can happen. Right. And I think about that all the time. Like that quote stays in my head so often, because we've seen teams come back from 3-1 deficits. We've seen teams start god awful in April and then turn it up come time the All-Star break. So I mean, I understand the frustration, but with that Yankees team, I would not be too worried. I wouldn't sweat it, especially I love Yankee Stadium too. That was one of my, everyone's high on Citi Field, which it is. Citi Field's so fun, and it's got good food, but there's something about going to the Bronx. You got the bars like right off the train stop that are there. So fun. And then I thought Yankee Stadium was beautiful. So one of my favorite spots to go to in the summer in New York. I missed it last year.
Sad. So sad.
COVID took so much from us. And
I know. And the thing is too, like I've been to the old Yankee Stadium as well. And like, right there, like it's like a big field that like you wouldn't even know what it was if you didn't know, but like there's like a little like signifier that's like, this is where the old Yankee Stadium used to
that
be.
one little plaque or something. Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting emotional walking by the bars, and there's like that. I'm trying to walk into the thing, and I'm like, oh my God, old Yankee Stadium.
That's where like so many, like a part of me, Dodger Stadium is still standing, so I won't say that, but like Ebbets Field in Brooklyn, like I get why it's not there anymore. The team's not there, so why would you keep a ballpark there? But so much history happened there, and like that's where I feel so envious of teams like the Red Sox and the Cubs that still have their storied ballparks that are 100 years old. And I know I say that as a Dodgers fan, where it's like, okay, you calm down. Your team, you still have your storied ballpark in Los Angeles, which is true, but it's something about that old time ballpark feel is so different, and it's so cool as a baseball fan to see. Meanwhile, you've got the beautiful up-to-date state ballparks, which are always fun, but going to something that just how much history happened there, people from all walks of life in the 1900s were going there. That's one of the coolest things I think about baseball, is just how storied and how much history is behind the game.
Yeah, and I think that even at the new Yankee Stadium, because the Yankees are such an old team and they have like all this stuff that and everyone knows about the old Yankees. You got Babe Ruth, Joe DiMaggio, like you got all these guys, and I think that they were able to keep that in the stadium almost, like even though it's the newer one. So I think that they accomplished that really well. But I just want to mention that the Anaheim Ducks logo is probably the hardest sports logo I've ever seen in my life. That was another interaction we had about that hat that I absolutely wanted to buy. I was like, this is literally the coolest logo I've ever seen in my life. How could you not want a duck-shaped hockey mask as a logo? It's like hardest logo ever. I love it.
It's my favorite for sure. And it pains me now that nowadays they've got it on the shoulder for certain jerseys, which I miss. Now we've got this guy right here, which is okay. I don't hate it. So many hockey fans rag on it. They say it's the ugliest logo they've ever seen. I'm like, okay, let's relax here. It's not uglier. Is it pretty? Is it great? No. Is it ugly? No. It's like I give it a solid 4 or 5 out of 10. Like it's
fair.
But I still have my jerseys from back in the day. I love, the vintage Mighty Ducks gear. I still have all of it. I literally stole all my parents' stuff. So before they could give it away, I was like, no, we're hanging on to this. But it is cool. It's one of those things where, the throwback nights are always fun. And the NHL did this reverse retro campaign with Adidas where each team got its own, it was a project where it was a mix between like a throwback uniform and the current logo and the current uniform that they have. Some teams knocked it out of the park. The Ducks, I thought, did really well. The Rangers is a big fan favorite. They brought back Lady Liberty. The Islanders swung and miss on theirs. I mean, they had such a great opportunity to do so. And it was just such a fun project because there's so much about sports that's nostalgia and we love hanging out, like, especially from our childhood. I mean, you're in your 20s, correct? Yeah. Okay, so like the 90s.
I look young. I know I look young.
I was gonna say, you never know nowadays. So, there's, especially in sports and on social media, you'll talk to people. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, I'm 18." I was like, "Geez, okay."
You're like, "Oh my god."
I like one of the co-hosts on the radio show I do in Orange County is 18, and I was talking about opening day at Dodger Stadium I went to in 2005, and I was listing off players and looking at his face. I was like, "You were in diapers, man." That was the first day I felt really old. I was talking to him. I'm like, okay, I need a sip of water. All right. I'm going to add some more collagen into my routine here. Okay.
I know.
But it's just, I mean, we love reliving the old days. We love, especially when you have such a storied tradition behind your team. And some hockey fans get very elitist because there's the original 6 hockey clubs before the league expanded in the 60s. And, there's kind of this stigma around the original 6 thinking because they started the league and they're better, but there is something very cool about rooting for a team that has such storied history like the Yankees or the Dodgers. And, especially if our parents, I assume your parents were Yankees fans as well.
Yeah,
like if our parents, our parents growing up going to games, there's that connection there, and them being able to take us to games as kids. I don't know, it's a cool project to do, and I hope Adidas tries to. Well, Adidas doesn't, because Nike has baseball jerseys, so probably won't do it with them, but I hope Nike does something similar. I know for one of the things, what year was it? I think it was 2019, because I love when the Yankees and the Dodgers play each other. The last time I went to, it was Mariano Rivera's last season, and he came to Dodger Stadium. They did the whole, I think they gave him a fishing pole as a gift because he loves to fish, but you had like Rachel Robinson on the screen, and because he was the last guy to wear 42 before they retired it for Jackie. And she said he would be so proud that you were the last to wear his number, but he would not be happy that a Yankee was the last one to do it. But it was Players Weekend, and I love when they do the cool jerseys. I like when they do those things, but Players Weekend falling when the Dodgers and the Yankees were playing each other. You have the two most iconic uniforms in baseball. And we got stuck with the all black and all white ones. I was like, no, I want to see the Dodger whites. I want to see the pinstripes. Like, come on. Like, this was just cruel to do it then. But yeah, I mean, leagues they tap into those little things that we as sports fans love and hold so close to our hearts.
Oh yeah. I love vintage sports stuff. Is so much cooler than like modern sports stuff. I know my mom just went through a bunch of clothes. She pulled out a 1998 World Champions Yankees sweatshirt, and she was like, "Well,
oh, girl, hang on to that.
We don't need this." And I was like, "Whoa, I'll take it."
Like, excuse me.
Please don't throw that away. That. I snatched it and I like put it in my room. I was like, no, stay.
Don't you dare run everything by me before you decide to donate or anything. And that's one thing that's so frustrating about being a female, I feel, especially as women. There is, and I say this, I've done stuff with fanatics, but I've made it very clear, you know, let's put it this way, all the things I've done with fanatics, like I've had to like dress up and stuff because their options for women are awful, god awful. Like even growing up, like the women's cut jerseys, which I hate. I hate those. I tried them when I was little and I grew like a teenager, but your body's doing weird stuff. And I'm like, yo, I want it loose. Like when I go to a ball game, I'm having a hot dog. When I was a kid, it was a soda. Now it's a beer of some kind. Like I don't want to feel confined in my clothing. And when I'm at a ball game, like let the jersey, I want a big jersey. I want to have a good time, not worry about my waist size or anything like that, or if a button's gonna pop off. Exactly. Like throwing pink on something doesn't make it fashionable, doesn't make women want to wear it. Like okay, if you like that, that's cool, do your thing. But I have met no women that want their team in just pink form.
No, I absolutely despise that. And like in that picture that I sent you with the NY on my cheek, I have a pink Yankee hat on, and I remember hating it, but it was the only Yankee cap I had. I have a tiny ass head, you know, like they don't make little girls hats other than ones that are pink.
Right. Pink and like got sparkles or like something on it. Yeah.
I hate that. And I hate the way that they cut in.
Yes, exactly. I was like, who is shaped like this? What percentage of women are like shaped like a perfect hourglass? And that's like the any kind of jersey, like a football jersey does not look good, like look good like that. Like it doesn't look good at all. No.
Baseball jerseys too. They like because you wear them a lot of times. I wear them open. Like,
open, right?
Best way to wear. Like I'm not gonna wear a cut in jersey open. Like
right.
That doesn't look good. So I totally agree with you though. I hate they're starting, I think, to kind of move away from the glitz and the pink, but it's still like just doesn't work. And I've explained to my brother a ton of times, who likes to buy me like jerseys and stuff for my birthday or for Christmas. I'm like, buy from the men's section.
Exactly. I'll give you my men's measurements.
Yeah.
Go crazy. Don't even click women's. Do me a favor. Don't even touch it.
Don't even bother with it. It's first of all, like a lot of times I don't even like the designs they have there. Right. And it's just so much better. And like, I'm like, just men's section only. The best stuff is there.
Right.
Good for me.
Well, like even, do you remember when Victoria's Secret Pink would have like the MLB, the NFL collections, and some of them were cute. Like I was like going through old clothes and I found like these yoga pants, like rest in peace Victoria's. Well, they're still around, but I don't know anyone that wears them anymore, but the Victoria's Secret yoga pants. But then you had to get them in like a set. And the set came with like the shirt that says designated kisser or like meet me in the dugout. I was like, I am not wearing this. Oh, like the designated kisser shirt did not leave my room. I did not wear it. I didn't even wear it around my brothers because I knew I would get roasted for it. And I think there's one back when the Chargers were still in San Diego, and I have one that was like Bolts fans are great kissers. I was like, I did not wear that once. Like once. It was I mean, they had some like cute, like I know I've seen like the zip ups that were cute, but I'm like, why I would like the meet me in the, like those sayings. I think there was a football one where it was like meet me in the end zone. I was like, you're letting teenage girls wear that.
And do what? What are we doing in the end zone?
Exactly. Especially when you're 16. I was like, yo, whoever you're meeting in the end zone don't know what to do in the end zone. All right.
Oh my god, that is so funny. That's so true though. It's like there's no reason for us to have any other thing on our shirt. Like I couldn't even imagine them making any sort of male t-shirt that says like best
they would never
whatever
designated kiss.
Could
you imagine?
They would riot. They would like
burn. Oh, exactly.
Oh my god, that's so funny. But so we do have sports things to talk about, like sports stories. So there's a few things that I want to go over. First things first, this is a little bit old at this point, but I haven't had a chance to talk about it on like my own platform. So I want to discuss Julian Edelman. And Julian Edelman has recently retired. a lot of people are like, he's going to the Bucks. He's going to the Bucks. I have to explain to several people, all of them men, that failing your physical means you cannot play football. Like,
Right.
that is why Julian Edelman has retired. He has failed his physical. He cannot play football. If maybe he wants to come back and redo a physical, then maybe. But
Right.
as of right now, he cannot go anywhere because he can't play football.
Yeah.
So Julian Edelman, he retires. I mean, he's had this amazing career as a wide receiver on the Patriots, as a Super Bowl MVP. No doubt one of the best Patriots wide receivers, up there with Wes Welker, like, all good things.
Right.
There's the Hall of Fame discussion. And I know where I stand, and I'm very curious to see what other people think about it. So what are your thoughts on Julian Edelman and the whole Hall of Fame discussion about him not being in the Hall of Fame or being in the Hall of Fame?
It's an interesting discussion. I personally love talking Hall of Fame with people of any kind of sports fan, because I think everyone's definition and criteria for who belongs in the Hall of Fame varies. You've got a few common denominators, stats, obviously, awards, how many All-Star games or Pro Bowls they've been to,
Right.
But generation to generation, I feel like it varies. And I think at some point, people think some sports it's very easy to get into the Hall of Fame, it feels like, and other sports it's much more difficult. I think baseball is one of those sports that's very difficult to get into the Hall of Fame. Not everyone's a first ballot 100% vote in Mariano Rivera. You've got guys that wait 10 plus years after they retire to get into the Hall of Fame. So I know it varies. The definition and criteria varies person to person. With that being said, about Julian Edelman, do I think he gets into the Hall of Fame? First ballot, no, not a chance. Drew Brees retired the same year. He's not getting in first ballot, not with those guys, and the guys that will probably still be up for it. Great Patriot, did a lot in his career. I think he gets into the Hall of Fame eventually, just based on playoff performance and how huge he was playing with Tom Brady. Do I think he should? Those are two different questions. I think someone will push that narrative. I think correct me if I'm wrong. I pulled up stats yesterday on this, but he's in the NFL history in the postseason. He's second in receptions and receiving yards, 118 receptions and 1,442 receiving yards behind Jerry Rice. So those numbers alone, someone could make a case for him to be in the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely.
But regular season, Julian Edelman was never the best. There was never a year of his career where he was hands down the best receiver in the league. Right. And to me, I think that's where a lot of people say, hey, if Julian Edelman gets into the Hall of Fame, we got to go back and look at all the other guys that had the luxury of playing with a Tom Brady. Because let's be honest, if he did not go to the Patriots, if he did not have Tom Brady as his quarterback, would he be a Hall of Famer? And that's something, we can, you can discuss depending on, who the person is, who's his quarterback, what team he goes to, which is kind of you're opening a can of worms there. But for me, I do think that in some cases where, you look at stats, you look at, how they did against the best competition, who saw them in their, ask the people that saw them in their prime, ask people they played with for their ranking on a player. And I think one thing where you can kind of have those exceptions to maybe not all-star, because he doesn't have any Pro Bowls. He never went to the Pro Bowl.
Right.
An exception to not having a stellar record regular season is when you've got those clutch moments where either you make history or you just make your mark on the game. And in the playoffs, I think Julian Edelman has that. The numbers speak for themselves when it comes to the playoffs, but if we're talking overall, if you want to take into fact the regular season, should he make the Hall of Fame? No.
Right.
I'll say it. No. Patriots Hall of Fame, hands down. Absolutely. If you want to, I don't think his number gets retired, but Hall of Fame there for sure. I do think he does eventually, not to say that it's easy to get into Canton, but in some case, I feel like football, it's one of those things where if you balled out in a Super Bowl, you're probably going to get into the Hall of Fame.
Right.
So that's, I know they're kind of two different answers there, but I do think eventually he will make it to Canton.
Yeah, it's funny because there are a lot of people that are like, hands down, he's going here and whatever. But like you've spoken about a lot of the points that I was thinking of that I'm like, okay, yeah, he has phenomenal postseason.
Right.
But think about all the times that the Patriots are in the postseason in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
So and I mean Tom was there before Julian Edelman even, thought about being in the NFL.
Exactly.
So, there's the PEDs that I think a lot of people are forgetting about. Like he got suspended for PEDs, and I actually watched like he has like a documentary. I forget what it's called. It's like JE11 or something along those
That's
lines.
That's what his company's called. So probably.
Yeah,
it's funny. It's
like
TB12 and JE11. Real original.
Original Julian. But he talked about like his PEDs and everything, and like his father didn't talk to him for like months after that. So like it was a really big deal about him getting suspended in the NFL for that.
Right.
Like that's a big thing to take into account. It's like
absolutely.
So like anybody who gets steroids can be like, oh well, I'll just do it and then I'll get suspended for whatever, and then but it'll be fine. It'll be good for my Hall of Fame creds. Like you can't really do that.
Exactly.
So, and of course there are people that aren't even in the Hall of Fame yet that are, I think, deemable, that are wide receivers like Hines Ward, Chad Ochocinco are two of the biggest that people are discussing right now. Like, how can you just assume that Julian Edelman is going to get in before either of these guys? So, like you were saying, it's hard because Patriots Hall of Fame, 100%. He took so many sacrifices. He was a slot receiver. He got banged up the middle almost every play, basically, that he was in. That is a sacrifice of statistics and things like that like you don't see on paper, but you see in terms of the character as a player. Yeah. So that definitely, unless someone like bullies the NFL Hall of Fame into making him someone down the line, years from now, like I really don't see the reason why he should be in it. It's just, it doesn't make sense to me. But a lot of Patriots fans, like when you bring that up to them, they freak out. And
of course,
they do not like the idea of Julian Edelman not being in the Hall of Fame.
Well, they're like, and I feel like in any sport, like there's so many people or so many athletes that get enshrined into the Hall of Fame. Like just recently this past year, there was a guy that got enshrined into the Hockey Hall of Fame who played on almost all of Wayne Gretzky's Edmonton Oilers teams and then went to the Rangers and was there in 94 when they won the cup. So they're like, oh, he was a character guy, never the best at his position, but like character guy, integral part. He gets into the Hall of Fame. Now, granted, we're now years past that, so it's not, necessarily something that could happen, I think, anytime soon, just given the talent and who, like the names you've listed, names that still have not been enshrined into the Hall of Fame. And you bring up PEDs, I feel like, especially in baseball, I mean, we've got huge names that are still left out of the Hall of Fame. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens have not seen the Hall of Fame. And, I feel like if you're going to put a guy that has a history of steroid usage or performance enhancing drugs into the Hall of Fame, you got to understand what that's going to do down the line. You got to understand that's going to make everybody question every vote, every ballot from when guys were missed off because of that reason. Because let's be honest, there's better athletes than Julian Edelman that have used performance enhancing drugs that have not been enshrined into the Hall of Fame. Like it's one of those things you got to be really careful about. And that's why so many athletes come just short of that percentage to qualify. And that's why I think baseball is very prepared for that. In Cooperstown, they've got a whole, not like a whole exhibit, but actually pretty much a whole exhibit. They've got a good size talking about the use of performance enhancing drugs and, the weird hormones. The Manny Ramirez he did some weird hormone treatment that got him suspended with the Dodgers, which let's not talk Manny Ramirez here, but or like the cork in the bat kind of thing. Like you got to acknowledge that your game is not perfect and that there's periods of time where, people didn't follow the rules and where, people skirted around them. But on the other side of that, like steroid, listen, I'm against PEDs, but also we got such entertaining baseball for the most part. I mean, think about Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. They did that whole They did, what was it, a 30 for 30 on both of them. And even though they won't get into the Hall of Fame, like that baseball was so fun. Like I was very young when that was going on, so I don't remember it. But I mean, just watching that and just hearing, my parents talk about it, my brother who was old enough to be there, remember seeing them play baseball. Like nowadays when baseball's like, everyone's like, baseball's boring, baseball's slow. Well, you can't really say that this year for one, because it's been awesome, I think, so far. But two, like you get these exciting players and like just revitalizing the game. And Barry Bonds, how as much as I hate him, was a huge part of that. And I can't believe I took this discussion from Julian Edelman and football to baseball, but
that's okay.
Exactly. There's, like I said, I think someone is going to make a case for him enough. And if you want to, like, I feel like so many athletes, you can make a case, and there's those character guys that, hey, integral part of a team, and no one can take that away from them. You've got, Julian Edelman's got 3 Super Bowl rings. No one can take that away from him. It's just the fact that you were never the best at your position. And that's where it gets me. Exactly. That's fine. Doesn't mean you don't have a great career. It doesn't mean you don't, you're not storied. Like, hell, being retired by the Patriots, being in the Patriots Hall of Fame for me would be good enough, honestly. But I do think down the line, someone will use that character case. Someone will use that, oh, he's an integral part of that team, the locker room. You don't win 3 Super Bowl rings. Tom doesn't win those rings without Julian Edelman. Right. Someone will make that case, I think. And who knows when down the line that maybe PEDs become more discussed and more people kind of take a lax on them. I don't see it happening personally, just because
not
I think
anytime soon.
You're opening a huge can of worms with that. You're going to cause a lot more problems.
Yeah.
Should that continue? But
I've seen people talk about how like the MLB would be so much more fun if you just allowed them to take steroids.
Oh God.
And like you were saying, like when that was all going down, like I know, like for me as a Yankee fan, like A-Rod was like the guy that did the steroids, and like it was,
right.
He was like, I can remember watching the game when he came back, and they were half of the stadium was giving him a standing ovation, and the other half of him was booing. Like it was so mixed emotions, and as a little kid, I'm like, what are we doing? Are we for this? Are we not for this? Like, how does this work?
Yeah, as a kid, you're taught cheating is bad. So when you see this and people are cheering, you're like,
I was like, why are we cheering for A-Rod? I thought
exactly
that drugs. I'm so confused.
The only time I think it gets very like down the line is where some guys, like some athletes will take like, which like I know Julian Edelman blamed it on like something that a nutritionist gave him or his trainer, like whether it was pre-workout or something. But some of these pre-workouts have these chemicals that can trigger those tests. And I know there was a case in the NHL with Nate Schmidt of the then Vegas Golden, when he was on the Vegas Golden Knights, where he said, I switched a supplement that had like 0.2% of this, and he was suspended for that. Suspended for a large part of the season. And at that point you're like, okay, like really? You're just like, is this, I get it. I understand why it's so serious with the Olympics and why they take they have the rules that they do. But if we're talking like 0.02 and it's from, you have a doctor verification where you're like, hey, I gave this to him for this reason, it's just a medication I prescribed to him, excuse me. And it's just like, like at what point, like I understand wanting to keep the game fair and wanting to keep it clean as much as possible, but at some point you're like, if you're just looking for problems at that point. I feel like
the one that comes off the top of my head that I was so pissed about as a Giants fan was when we had Golden Tate. I think it was 2 years ago this happened. He was taking a fertility drug. He was trying to have a baby, and they were like, well, there's something in that fertility drug that is like considered on the non drugs list. And I'm like, the guy literally is trying to have a baby. Like, are we serious right now? I was so pissed off about that. And he missed 4 games.
That's such a personal problem. That's such an intimate, personal reason too. That's like, you're violating the wife's the family's privacy there. I forgot about that. Oh my God.
That got me. I still am like triggered about it to this day. We don't even have on our team anymore. Like, he's not even a Giant anymore. And it just made me so mad because I was like, for what? Because the guy wanted to have a kid with his wife. Like, really? That's I agree with you in that. Like, it's like, obviously they're not taking it because they're trying to get bigger or do their game
right. Like, get a note. What do you need? A note from the OB? Like, what? It's people are like Roger Goodell to me. Like, I can go off about how much of a clown that I think he is, but
we could go on a rant about Roger.
Oh, absolutely. That's another hour just dedicated to Roger Goodell. Right.
But yeah, I think 100% we covered all of the, in terms of PEDs, in terms of Hall of Fame, Julian Edelman, everything, we covered it all. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to talk about with you is this European Super League that is taking the world by storm right now. I mean, we kind of discussed before, we're not really soccer people, but this is like a worldwide thing that everyone is freaking out about. So basically 12 of Europe's top soccer clubs are just want to make their own super league, play against one another, but then continue on with their normal matches and things like that. And that apparently has everyone they like set the dumpster on fire. I don't know what went down. I don't know why they're so upset about it, but these are big teams, like teams that I just like. Real Madrid is like something everyone knows about, and like Barcelona,
Arsenal, AC Milan, Manchester United. Yeah,
it's like these really big teams, and they want to make like this league that's like the best teams in soccer, basically. Right. So, and they're very, very upset about it. They are like the higher ups, I guess, in soccer. Again, I'm not entirely sure, but they're like, they want to pursue legal action. So like, what are your thoughts on all this? Because this is like kind of out of the realm of this podcast, and I'm very much curious about how this whole thing is going down and what other people's thoughts are on it.
For me, I mean, the first reaction from here, which is the reason why most ownership does what they do, is money. You have these billionaire owners. I mean, you look at the list of profitable sports franchises in the world, they're always soccer up top, because, and it's so funny when you see it on Twitter, everyone's like football. And I have to remember, I was like, oh yeah, soccer. You gotta transfer that, switch it over. But, yeah, it's always these teams. You've got billionaires that own these teams. They're just swimming in money. So the fact that they all want to take the best teams and come together and make their own league. Like, for me, I think it's disappointing, for one, because soccer, which you can't really argue it. It's the world's, the most popular sport in the world. Outside of the United States, like, everybody's playing soccer. North America, we won't. Canada's probably, but outside of the United States and Canada, like, everybody's playing soccer. It's disappointing, but the United States never in the World Cup. These other teams, especially on the men's side, is so dominant. The women, another story. We run that, we know.
Right.
But, for me, like, I try to think about this, and the way where I see it being very transferable to, like, people say, oh, it's like if the Yankees, Dodgers, Cubs, and Red Sox all got together and decided to make their own league. But for me, just when I think about it in the United States term, I think college football is probably, and the way I think about it is, say, you take Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame, all those guys were like, hey, let's just make our own conference and forget everybody else. But a huge part of college football is, you like the big games. You like watching when Clemson and Alabama play each other. We love the Iron Bowl when Auburn and Alabama face off, but the true essence of college football is those small college towns. It's that Saturday afternoon in the fall. You've got the small businesses and the fans and the people that didn't even go to that school but are so excited. They have their team, and the college football atmosphere is just something so special and so very American, in my opinion. And thinking about that on soccer kind of has that similar effect over in Europe, where it's so popular, everybody loves it, but it's also very accessible. Soccer is one of those games, like they say, invented by the poor and like taken over by the rich. And soccer is one of those games where, you know, people in the poorest of countries are able to pick up a ball and play the game. And for me, like, it's just really disappointing to see these owners want to segregate that and take the best teams and the best talent and separate them from everybody else. I'm a big proponent of, no matter what sport you're in, to grow the game and grow, whether it's athletes, whether it's fans. You should always trying to be reaching a new fan base. But if you're a soccer club in Europe, you don't necessarily feel the need to do that, I guess. And then this move just shows it. But meanwhile, I mean, football is bar none the most popular sport in the United States, but you still have your fan development departments, you still have community relations, you still have those departments say, hey, we want to create new fans. There's a reason why they put so much money into social media, into, you know, that's why the social media teams of football teams, I think, are the best. And that's coming. Hockey, they've got good people running Twitter accounts, but I mean, look at the Carolina Panthers and what they were able to generate after the Sam Darnold trade. Just
so
chef's
good.
kiss. So I know you love that as a Giants fan, I'm sure. But it's really disappointing for the most part. And I say this, you know, just like you said, I'm not a soccer person. I'm not playing FIFA. I'm not turning on Champions League on a Sunday morning, but you don't grow the game this way. This is not how, and also not to mention, if you take all the talent and all the fans and you go to this super league and you know, because fans like to watch teams that are good, and that's understandable. I get that. Right. But these other teams, and I say this knowing that those owners are, while not as rich as an AC Milan or Arsenal, you know, they're going to suffer. They're going to take a financial impact. And because of that, so will the game of soccer. So I just don't see how this benefits anybody but the owners of those teams.
Yeah. It's the thing is that, like, sports right now, it's all about money. It's all about making money. And that's the bottom line of it all. But I understood like why they thought about it, and like we're like, oh, well, obviously everyone's gonna watch this if it has like the best teams playing each other. But you made a very good point that it's like, well, what about all the other teams that like maybe are not as big, or people aren't, you know, going to watch because they're not playing a bigger team.
Right.
So it makes sense. But like if they kind of did it more like on like a, not, I don't want to say not professional because they're professional players, but like kind of on a more leisure thing that's like, oh, it's like more like a scrimmage instead of like a game that matters in a way. You know what I mean? Right. Like it's like Arsenal played Real Madrid and it was just like you could just see them play, but the game didn't have any like consequences to it, and they just like continued on with their normal schedules and like did whatever. That could be really great and you'd still make money off of it.
Right.
I just don't know if like in like a league in and of itself is necessary, except for like maybe people wanting to just watch them play. I don't know if that's even plausible to do, but you know, that could work. That could work in just in terms of just them playing, and maybe on a, like, I mean, is soccer all year round? I don't even know, but like on the off season of soccer, is that even a thing?
There is, I know the MLS has an off season here, but I assume they have to have an off season. Right.
But I think soccer is always on.
I only watch the World Cup. I gotta be honest. So
I don't even know.
And that's why it pains me when the United States isn't even in it. I was like, the one time I watched soccer, I can't even have the men in it.
The men's United States soccer team is so awful.
It's a joke. And that's why it's so hilarious. Like not even hilarious. It's hilarious to the point where it's hilariously disappointing that the women who have won and are the best of the best in the women's category, can't even get equal pay. And you can't even, no matter how you spin it, as far as revenue goes, anything, like they're bringing in more money than the men are. And so that's the argument everybody uses when it comes to paying women fairly. It's like, oh, it's the revenue. Forget what was the case. Oh, it was the NCAA when they showed the mediocre gym setup, and so many men in the comments are like, I would say boys, they're not men, boys, but we're like, oh, it's revenue. It's all about revenue. I'm like, yo, this is the NCAA here. It's not supposed to be about revenue. You have to follow Title IX, but it's one of those, it frustrates me to no end. So the fact that, people think they're wrong for wanting to demand equal pay when our men's team is so laughably bad. Like you don't even qualify for the tournament. That's bad. Like it'd be one thing, hey, you make the tournament and you get, a couple, like I remember the Landon Donovan game. I think was that the last time the men were in the World Cup? Like it feels like it.
I couldn't even tell you.
I remember the Landon Donovan game, the goal, and then they lost to Ghana and got, booted out. Which, hey, when the men win on an international stage, I understand the hype there. I get it because I was living in New York when the last World Cup was going on. And, I don't need to tell you, New York is a melting pot of so many countries. And seeing all the bars, like the fun, like there was a French restaurant that had the French flags and everybody was out there celebrating. Like everybody gets so into it. And I wish the women had that same support, but that's why it's one of those things where you're just like, I feel like soccer could be like on that level of where it is in Europe. But the problem is like kids in America want to play football. They want to play basketball. They want to play baseball, or they want to play hockey. There's other sports that they're going to play. The best athletes are going to play football. They're going, that's because that's where the money is. You make more money being an NFL player than you do being an MLS player.
Right.
So it's interesting reading the news and trying to say, okay, like what's the equivalent? What would be an equivalent to over here? For us kind of experiencing that. But I get it. I mean, as somebody that, some of them, I wouldn't say all LA teams, but, the Ducks being one of them, one of the teams that's often overlooked, that's often, not thought of as having a major fan base or being a powerhouse. They're not a powerhouse right now, but they have been before. Like, it's one of those things where you say, okay, if the best teams were going to go and just separate themselves, I mean, there's slim to none chances I would get my games on TV. They wouldn't get national coverage. Like there's so many things where you would just get the short end of the stick.
Right.
And there's so many times, I mean, you don't see it too much in New York, it feels like. Maybe with certain teams, like, that there's that Yankees preference over the Mets, depending on who you are and where you are. But I see the more I think about it, the more you read it, you kind of see the impact on the fan experience. And, like I said, it's a game that you don't need to be rich to be able to play. You just need cleats, you need maybe some shin guards and a ball. And, some people don't even have those and they still play soccer. So it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. We're kind of peering in. Maybe I don't like the idea of it though. The more I think about it, I mean, you gotta have like this Super League. You think about it, like teams have to be bad. There's gonna be teams that are bad in the league. Like you can't win them all, obviously. Like
which of the super teams are the worst in the Super League? And
exactly, and like
that affects you negatively.
If you get eliminated, do you get kicked out? Like it just like you call up like another. I don't know, but. That's the one thing you got to remember with sports. And that's why like the MLB Players Association negotiations proved that perfectly last year was a commissioner. So your Rob Manfreds, your Adam Silvers, your Gary Bettmans, your Roger Goodells, they work for the owners. The owners literally elect and vote their commissioner. They are working not in the best interest of the game, not in the best interest of the fans, of the ownership. And I think that's one of the things I've said on my show back when we were talking about that was, hey, the sooner you get that in your head, the sooner, like, I think Adam Silver's done a great job with the NBA. I would rank him. My ranking goes this. It goes Adam Silver, Gary Bettman, Roger Goodell, and Rob Manfred. That's my big four hierarchy. But I said, the sooner you understand, like, don't put these guys on a pedestal. They're not going to act within the best interest of the game. And that's because that's not in their job description.
Right.
So they're all about making the owners money. That's why the NHL didn't go to the Olympics in 2018. They didn't go to the Olympics. It's why that whole negotiation was dragged out to the percentage, to the amount of games played during the return to play last year.
Right.
It's why ownership has to vote in what people can come in and buy a team, like to join their group. Like it's all about that green dollar. It's it's an unfortunate realization, but I do feel like so many people rag on the Steinbrenner family and George Steinbrenner for being greedy and money hungry. I was like, yo, He's running a business. Sports is a business. You got it. The bottom line. You want to make a profit. So I feel for the soccer fans. I do, that are upset and disappointed about this.
It'll be interesting to see what ends up happening because soccer is a very powerful sport. So, if they do end up taking some sort of legal situation, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And sometimes I kind of wish that soccer was a little bit more of a US sport, because I remember in 2018, I was in Europe and there was, I forget what tournament was going on, but it was, the FIFA tournament or whatever. And people were, went to Venice with my family, and there were people outside bars just standing there, just watching games that had nothing to do with anybody's country, but they were so diehard about it. And I'm like, this is like the Super Bowl, but it's every day.
Right.
It just seems like it's like a really cool community, it feels like. In the United States, we don't have that in terms of soccer here. With football, I feel like it is a little.
Football for sure. It's crazy. I just looked up and I was actually wrong. But there are 3 teams. Real Madrid, FC Barcelona, and Manchester United are in the top 10 most profitable, most valuable sports franchises. The top being the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah. I'm sorry. I know. I was like, oh, that won't go over well. But the Yankees are second. But it's crazy to think about. And maybe I have actually not yet been to Europe. I need to do that. I was going to go last year, but of course,
it was my first time there and my only time. So
COVID decided it. Oh, I need to do it. But I mean, it's crazy to think that, soccer there is as big as football is here, because I mean, like I said, bar none, it's the most popular sport in the country.
Right.
But it's, I can't imagine an NFL without the New York Jets, without the Jacksonville Jaguars, without, unfortunately, as of now, the Houston Texans, that are just kind of going through the lull of it, are not a super team by any means of, it's,
you need those little guys.
Exactly. You need, like I said, you got to be able to ride the roller coaster. Every sports fan is going through it. You got to have the peaks and valleys. The Patriots fans are going through it right now, which, not a bad thing. Yeah.
I'm not upset.
You had your run, you had your fun. Now it's time. It's,
that's now been shifted to reality.
Join us.
Yeah. Welcome to reality. And Tampa Bay is now in that alternate reality,
which is crazy to think about.
The best ever. But yeah, no, it's gonna be really interesting to see how this all plays out. And in soccer, like I've never really talked about soccer on the podcast, but this seems like a very big deal. So
it is, and it's like it on an international level too, for sure, because soccer fans are everywhere, despite it not being so big here. But people that play FIFA and watch the Champions League and everything, they're into it.
Yeah, no, it'll definitely be interesting to see how this all plays out. Yeah. So the last thing that I want to talk to you about before we wrap up our interview is this Twitter debate that I've been seeing around Twitter recently, especially obviously in sports Twitter. So basically this guy, who I don't even have his name because I just, he's just some random guy that just talked about the fact that if he was put into an NFL game, he would get at least a yard. Like if the ball was handed off, it was a run play, you'd get at least a yard. And everybody just started just putting in their own opinions about everything. They're like, oh, well, I could do this and I could do that and blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, this is this is a conversation to have. And I will say that a lot of those guys that are having those conversations are men, because, obviously that men are playing football and so on and so forth. But I wanted to have this conversation with you because I thought it would be kind of fun. So if, say you're in the NFL, let's just start overall. Do you think that you would excel in any sort of position? And in that position, would you do the bare minimum to be the player, basically?
When you sent me this question, I had to think about it for a little bit. So part of me thinks I was a lacrosse goalie in high school, and that gave me a lot of my coach told me, he's like, the goalie is the quarterback of the field. You have the best view, you see who's open, and there's lots of times where you're clearing the ball to get open. So I thought quarterback. But part of me, if I had to pick something a position I think I would be good at, it's I would probably be a pretty good wide receiver at this point. And I say that only because, listen, when it comes to like working out and like running, I hate long distance. I would rather literally lay in traffic than run long distance. Like people that are like, I do half marathons for fun. I run 26 miles because I enjoy it. I'm like, huh? Like,
no.
No, I do like a workout class and I'm like, I'm good. Like, I feel good. That's all I need. And people are like, oh no, I just ran 10 miles. I was like, I'd be dead. I'd be out of commission for 3 days. But one thing I can do, and that I know, remember when I'm a boxer. So when I took it up in New York, one of the instructors always said, he's like, no, you got like muscle in your legs. You got power. You're good for like those quick sprints. Like you can do 30 seconds, high incline, high speed, like no problem. But anything after that, you're like dead. So I think I would be a good receiver in the sense like, yo, I mean, maybe I've got good hands. I could catch things. I played softball for a bit, so I like to think I've got good hands, good eyes.
Like needs that hand-eye
coordination. But if I catch it and it's about bolting to the end zone, I can do that. That's something I could probably do. But anything more, like I would probably like get there and then just pass out, fall to the ground. You don't even have to worry about any. No, I do the touchdown dance because I love a good touchdown dance. And then I'd be like on the ground, like on the sideline, just like I'm good. Give me a second.
No, I totally feel
I'm good.
I don't know how people run long distance. I am not a runner, but I definitely I was thinking about this as well. And I've always said, like, I'm very small. I'm, we can't really tell, but I'm only 5'2". Like, I'm a very small person, but I played catcher when I played softball in high school. So my legs are pretty strong. And big legs for me as a Giants fan, I think is Saquon Barkley.
I was just
So I'm like, all right.
Though. There you go.
So the running back thing, and a lot of running backs are pretty small because you kind of have to weave through.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how well my agility is in terms of juking. Like some of these guys have like mean jukes that like break ankles left and right. Don't know if I mean maybe I can train for that, but I definitely still like put me in these large group of men, I could just kind of weave through them and then get that clear thing again, sprint to the end zone and then pass out because
exactly I'd be done.
I like there were times when I was playing softball, like I'd hit the ball far enough to make it to third base or something, and I'd get on third and I'd be like, oh god,
okay, I'm good.
Can I get a pinch runner? I need to take a break.
I remember there was one time in softball I made one of my favorite catches that I ever made. This girl like hit a line drive. It was not a line. It was about a line drive. It was going into the outfield. And I jumped up enough to where I could catch it like with my hand, like way up in the air to stop it. And it makes me think of the OBJ catch, which actually I still remember that. Like it's one of my favorite highlight reels to watch. But I always think about that. I was like, I thought I did an OBJ catch. So,
yeah.
Who knows?
I could see it. I could see it. And like I literally been thinking about this. I was like, okay, realistically, putting me in put it in a scenario in which you're like, okay, the ball's being handed off. You're about to, there's a hole to run. Like, could you obviously you can make it a yard. Like that's not like a hard thing.
Yeah.
But then you have
a yard. Give me a yard.
Yeah. But then you're like, okay, for the whole game, I don't know if I could do a whole game.
No,
those games are like 4 hours long.
It just like makes me think so many of these guys that like either whether they played in college or played in high school, and they're like, oh yeah, I could do this. I could try out and make the team. Like an awful team like the New York Jets. Like they're like, I could make the Jets offensive line. I'm like, really?
I don't
really
so.
Could you? I doubt it. And that's why I hate when people bring up like, oh, could Alabama beat the New York Jets? I'm like, no, like the NFL is a whole other ball game compared to college football. Like we see
kids, they get rocked.
Exactly. You see how many kids that's why that transition from the NCAA to the NFL, it's so like people just when you get a rookie or especially like a rookie quarterback, that's why like the Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars are going to draft Trevor Lawrence. So like the Urban Meyer, Trevor Lawrence combo, like that's so important there to just kind of help develop and help him make the transition, because we've seen guys that are great in college. I mean, the list goes on. Tim Tebow, Johnny Manziel, what's his name? Notre Dame, Brady Quinn, like guys that were studs in college, and then they get to the NFL and they just don't meet expectations.
It's a different team.
Exactly. So that's why it's even funnier that like guys that did not play a college sport, or they did and didn't do much with it, are saying, no, I could do that. Like I could. It's so like, I don't know if you ever seen the clip where guys are like, and this is still on the topic of football, but like there's so much disrespect to the kicker, and guys are like, what's the easiest position to play in football? And they're like, kicker. It's like, okay, kick a field goal, go kick it. And it's like on the ground, it's all over the place. Like, and
there's so much credit, man. And punters too. Like that's not an easy thing to do.
Oh, absolutely not. And that's why, like, I love when you get like MLS guy, like the Chargers, like brought in, I forget, it was a few years ago. I want to say like more than a few years ago, probably like 7 years ago. They had a guy from Major League Soccer come in and kick their field goals. I was like, yo, whatever works.
Yeah, because obviously they're gonna be able to do it. You know, you can make that argument for Sarah Fuller, who was on the Vanderbilt college.
Exactly. Yeah.
She played soccer. She did perfectly fine as a kicker. So
even that, she got so much hate for that. Like being on TikTok, of course, you have to remember that like TikTok is all like children and high schoolers for the most part that are still think being misogynist and sexist is funny and cool. So like all the hate that Sarah Fuller was getting, like, oh, like she didn't even do a good kick. Like she's just on there because, you know, she has to, they want to, you know, for media, for press. I'm like, yo,
take it down.
Yeah, literally. I was like, it's not that big of a deal. I'm sorry. Like you can just chill on your JV bench. It's you will never play football for an SEC team. Like it's just your jealousy is showing here. Like calm down.
My favorite argument with like guys who've like played sports in the past are like, well, if I didn't blow out my knee, I definitely would have been.
That's the worst.
And I'm like,
you get it all the time.
Are you sure? Are you really sure that you playing in high school, that just because you tore your ACL, you would have made it to the NFL? Really? You got a lot of years in between there.
That's what you got. That's why, like, before, if it's like a first date or something, if you go on a dating app, like you got to look at the Max Prep profile online and be like, how good were your numbers though? Like, were you decent? No. Oh, and then that's why they're like, yeah, like I took tours of like D1 campuses and like I had offers, but I really like, my knee just wasn't the same. You're like, oh, okay.
Or say that to Tua Tagovailoa, who is currently recovering from hip surgery that dislocated his
hip. Like
he's in the NFL.
Which like there's occasionally like you get your sad stories like that, of course, but like for the most part, I'm like, no, you making varsity your senior year, barely coming off the bench. No, you were not. That tornado,
you're not
that hand injury is not what stopped you from going to a Big Ten or SEC school, my guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad that we had this conversation though.
No, it's like, oh, I feel like, oh, you could do a whole thing on like when you're like dating sports fans. Oh my God. That's how guys react with like girls who like sports is still absurd to this day.
I am so happy that the person that I date, my boyfriend, is not a sports fan. And I'm like,
there you go. See,
I'm okay with it.
I'm thinking that's what I need to do, honestly, because I was at that point where, like, you know, growing up, you're like, no, I want to date a sports fan, like something we can do together. And now, like, it's still in my 20s. I'm like, you know, I don't need it. No. And plus, like, the fact, like, that honestly, something about like a guy that's a super fan, like, I'm talking like super fan, like it's just really off-putting to me. And like I remember going over to a guy's place when I was living in New York, and he had like his wall decor was literally just flags of his favorite teams, and I'm like,
red flag,
you know. Red flag. The big red flag, which you're going to be disappointed in me, is when I walked in and I saw you're in Jets country. I'm like, oh dear Lord.
Gotta get out of there.
I don't want to be here. Or like when they hang jerseys on the wall, which that's okay if you're in college, you're in a dorm room, but buddy, like, come on, I'm not saying invest in artwork, but like a picture, like a framed photo of you and your friends or your family, like get the flags off the wall. Come on. Yeah, but yeah, I think that's the move I need to do. I need to like look for guys that don't like sports,
Yeah.
which we'll see. Let me know if you have tips for how I can find one. I don't know.
I don't. I just got lucky.
There you go.
But no, it's a lot more fun, and you get to tell them, like, you're like, hey, look, that I know about this guy and this and that and blah blah blah, and they think that you're like the coolest ever. So
that's what I need. That's what I need.
I definitely recommend a non-sporty man.
That's the thing where like you get, because so many guys, like you talk to them, they don't like not knowing enough as you,
Yes.
or like having a woman on their level, and it's just like, it's really
unless he's a guy that can like have an actual conversation with you about it, then
right.
Like there's the guys that do know maybe as much as you do, and then you can have like a debate about things, and that's
right.
fun. But otherwise, then a lot of other guys are just like, oh, well, like, you don't know the blood type of the son of the coach who was in the 1960s. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know.
My favorite, the worst TikTok comment I ever got was like, because nowadays it's like, because the Dodgers just won the World Series, it's like, oh, Dodgers fan bandwagon. Oh, you only like the Dodgers because of Corey Seager and Cody Bellinger, which neither of which are my type. So I'm like, first of all, no. But two, I was like, yo, I've been a Dodger fan my whole life. Unfortunately, like for the most part, it has not been that great. Like, have a nice day. And they're like, oh, what season ticket package do you have this year? How many bobbleheads do you have? And I'm like, bobbleheads, you're a loser. Oh my God. I'm a grown woman. I don't own bobbleheads. I'm sorry. I have the ones from giveaways that I get when I go to games, and that's it.
Oh my God.
But yeah,
it's don't have a life.
Literally. And listen, I respect the passion. I respect the family ties to sports, but like the idea of like, I feel like so much, and probably you feel the same way, like sports is so much a part of your life and your day-to-day career that you want to come home. Like when you're done working, when you're done preparing for your show, editing, like you want to do if you don't want to watch a game, you want to do anything but sports. Like you want to break from it, which is why like I've been watching like the Marvel movies right now. Like yes, I am. Are you watching Falcon the Winter Soldier? Yes, it's so good. I'm so into it. And it's just
oh my God.
It's my break from reality to you. My kind of girl right here. I like you. Wait, who's your favorite Avenger?
Oh my God. Well, I have to say I've always loved Spider-Man.
Okay, fair.
Always. And then Tom Holland came into the mix and I was like, all right, this is even better.
Well, this is what we're locked in here.
we're doing great. But I got to say Scarlet Witch is probably like the strongest and best Avenger. Like without her, she's like the Hermione of the Harry Potter series. Like without her,
good connection.
Everyone would die, like
that's true.
Yeah,
it's totally true.
It really is. She's like the coolest ever. But what's yours?
I loved WandaVision too. That was so good. So good. And I'm upset Falcon and the Winter Soldier is ending next week, but and then you've got Loki coming out. Oh, I'm so ready. It's gonna be
so good. It's gonna be so good.
I'm a mix. I go back and forth, honestly, but my favorite's got to be Thor. He's my favorite. Beside the fact that he's nice to look at, but like he's funny. Like the movies, Thor: Dark World sucked, I thought, but like I liked the original Thor. I liked Ragnarok. He's just the comedic timing, the relationship between him and Loki. I loved it. And of course, I mean, I feel like everyone's got a soft spot for Captain America. So
I mean, how could you not?
How could you not? I've done Winter Soldier is like my movie that I can watch like on repeat. And now TikTok has me convinced that I'm in love with Sebastian Stan. So
we are on the same TikTok.
You're scrolling through all like the worst. The worst is have you came across the fanfics, like where people make like the stories where if you see color, you see color when you see your soulmate.
Yes.
You hear the beginning of Heart Attack by Demi Lovato and you're like, oh, who am I looking at? Okay, who is it? Who's it gonna be?
Oh
The
my
word.
God, I'm literally on the same side of TikTok right now.
Yo, I got my favorite is when I was looking through a bunch, and they're usually always, Steve Rogers, Bucky Barnes, Thor. I've gotten a Tom Holland one, but then I got one where it was Thanos, and I lost it. I was like, I needed that break from the action.
Oh my God, I think I saw the same one. That is so.
I just
my
lost
God.
it.
No,
but
yeah.
The worst part is like you click on some of them and they're like very like some of them like the dialogue like that would never happen. Like they're at a party and they're like the Avengers all play Truth or Dare. I'm like, on what planet would the Avengers play Truth or Dare? Like no. But then you go to the profile and they're like, oh, 14. I was like, why is a 14-year-old writing this stuff? Like
they got nothing else to do.
I mean, I get it. It's COVID, but I'm also like, yo,
yeah, we got to take it easy.
Things are out of hand here. Does your mother know you're doing this? Like,
that is so fun. No, it's so true though. And I literally was watching TikTok with my boyfriend the other day, and I had so many Sebastian Stan things came up, and he was like, "Is there something you want to tell me?" He's like, "I'm seeing a lot of Bucky Barnes on here," and I'm like,
"Yo, I love Buck." Yeah,
he's well, if it's fair enough. I told him, I was like, to be fair, like you guys have the same features, like. Maybe I have a type. And he's like,
there you go.
Like, really?
You show the picture, you look alike. What are you talking about?
Same hair.
Or you could just be like, oh, I've been a Sebastian Stan fan since Gossip Girl. Like, I remember him in Once Upon a Time. Like, this is before Bucky Barnes. Come on. Like, I have so many, I know we're not talking about sports now, but I'm on like so many theories for the last episode of like what's going to happen. I'm so ready. By the way, you can probably, I was like, John Walker, I hate him so much. Oh my God, I hate him. Like
the worst
guy. And the worst part is he like looks like this guy I used to talk to. And I'm
no.
Oh, I hate you even more now. Oh my God.
He's awful. And like, there's no redeeming qualities about him. Like I don't feel bad for him. Like I'm not even gonna spoil anything for people who haven't watched.
Oh, that's true. That's true. We got to be careful. They're spoilers.
I don't want anyone to get upset. But yeah, he really is the worst, and there's no redeeming qualities about him. And I need this last episode to like just give him what's coming to him.
Exactly. And oh my God, part of me, I love like have you ever watched them in chronological order?
No, I'm watching them in like the way they were released.
Okay. No, yeah. Oh no, I meant the Marvel movies.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean.
Okay.
The movies, I'm watching them in the way that they were released because I feel like there's like, I don't know, but I feel like I should watch them in chronological order too.
Highly recommend. That's what I just finished doing. And it's so funny when you get to like some of them, like you love the first Avenger and then Captain Marvel kind of like, yeah. No offense to Brie Larson, like because I mainly watch that because it's like the origins, like Fury kind of comes about and comes in, but like it's the breath of fresh air when you watch Dark World and then you go to Winter Soldier. It's like you go from one of the worst to probably one of the best. You're like, oh, thank God.
Yes, and Winter Soldier is so good, and like that introduces that whole thing and everything that's going on in Falcon and Winter Soldier. I just watched Civil War the other day. Probably one of the best movies in Marvel, to be quite. I mean, it's so
absolutely.
Like, there's so many different parts in that I completely forgot about from the first time I watched it, and I was like, wow, these are excellent movies.
They're great, and there's so many connections and how the things they had to have thought about and been like, okay, we're gonna put this here, and then we got to remember to put that in this movie. Like, someone pointed out something recently. This isn't a spoiler for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but in Winter Soldier, when Bucky's in the car, Bucky and Sam are in the car, and he's like, can you move up your seat? Yes. And he goes, no. And then they get in the car here. It's like, you're not going to move your seat up, are you? He goes, no.
Oh my God. I heard that. And like, I knew exactly. I remember that scene.
Literally like throw yourself. Like, oh my God.
Yes. From Civil War. I remembered it. And I was like, oh my God, this is so great. And I love it so much. But yeah.
That is Civil War. That's right. You're right. That's Civil War. But it was, I love it. The thought, it reminds me of like Taylor Swift, like all the thought that she puts in her music and the music videos. I'm like, this is genius. Like, I don't think to do this. Like, I don't have that mind to think that deeply into like hidden messages, but it's such a fun break from like sports. Like that's why sometimes like people are like, oh, you want to come? You know, my dad will be like, yo, you want to come watch the game? And I'm just like, I just kind of want to watch a Marvel movie right now. I'm good. I was like, I'm gonna watch Iron Man 2. Thank you though.
We are on the same lane, like wavelengths with Taylor Swift, Marvel, Bucky Barnes, Sebastian Stan.
Yo, how did you feel about Tom Hiddleston and Taylor Swift dating?
I kind of thought it was a little weird.
It is weird.
I thought that it was just like at first I was like, okay, and then I was like, they don't really seem like they're like even dating. Like it just looked like people were taking pictures of them standing.
Topless, yeah. Well, I mean, homegirl clearly has a type, which I respect. Like scrawny English boys. Like, hey, girl, do your thing. I respect and support you. And I'm
Harry Styles.
Yo, Harry, who's isn't Calvin Harris British or English of some kind? Yeah, she's got a type. And I'm like, yo, girl, after going through what you've been through and all the media hate you've received, do what you want to do. Like, date who you want to date. But like, I love that Getaway Car is apparently about him because that's one of my favorite songs. Like if I'm driving and that song comes on, I'm like, yes. I'm so excited for Loki too. He's one of my favorite characters. Like it's just how like they perfectly casted those two. Like they perfectly casted anybody, I thought. But those two, just the dynamic between Tom and Chris Hemsworth, I'm like, oh, it is the back and forth. You can feel the brother, you know, the fact that they captured the brother relationship, but also the resentment there. And that's why I like the hate for the Thor movies. I'm like, yo, don't disrespect. Don't you dare.
Oh, I mean, the thing is that Dark World really is not.
It's terrible. Oh, I hate that movie. I watch you sit it through it and you're like, okay.
Yeah, I'm like, but Ragnarok is so good.
So
like
fun.
Ragnarok is so good.
Oh, I love my favorite. Hey, he's a friend of mine. We work together. It's a friend of work. Oh God, it's so fun. It's Loki's face. He's like, I gotta get out of here. Like, it's one movie that I think is slept on. I'm not a big Guardians of the Galaxy fan. Like, they're just not my favorite movies in the MCU. But just more my sense of humor with Ant-Man. I laugh every time when I watch Ant-Man.
Oh my God. When I rewatched Civil War and they brought him in to like be on like Cap's side, he's like, he's like, oh my God. And he's like sizing up at like his like shoulder length. He's like, you're even bigger in person. Oh my God. And then he like turns around and he looks at Wanda and he's like, I know you too. And like, Paul Rudd was a perfect cast.
Perfectly cast. And everyone kind of does like if it was cast in the 90s, who would be what? And Paul Rudd would be Paul Rudd. Like he and Robert Downey Jr. would probably stay in their character roles. And then of course you switch out certain people for who was more popular in the 90s. But no, Paul Rudd would be Paul Rudd easily. My favorite is when they're fighting at in Cassie's room and they come in the van and he's like, okay, go back it up. Back it up. Or like the storylines where like my cousin told this person to this person. It's so perfectly written and captured. I was like, that's more my sense of humor as opposed to like a Guardians of the Galaxy, which, hey, I get why it's funny. There's laughable parts, obviously, in those movies, but Ant-Man is just more my sense of humor.
The thing that I really like about Guardians of the Galaxy though is just the soundtrack. I think that true makes it really great. And I rewatched the first one because it was kind of in the midst of Winter Soldier and like all that stuff. It was like right in the middle of that. And I was like, oh, I'd like completely forgot about this movie, really. I mean, and Groot is just like, he's, Rocket and Groot are just like the fun relief of it all. And I saw in that 90s post that it's like, who would play what in the 90s? I saw Joe Pesci would play Rocket. And I thought that was the best thing in the entire world, and I want it to be true right now.
That would be funny. Oh my God, I forget who they had. Alicia Silverstone, who was she? I think she was playing Scarlet Witch.
Yeah,
that was like cool. That would have been good. Brad Pitt, or Leonardo DiCaprio playing Cap. My favorite is when not my favorite, but it was like they released people who tried out and wanted to audition for Captain America. I didn't know Joe Jonas apparently like submitted for it. I'm like, no, like,
oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, that's enough.
As I grew up loving the Jonas Brothers, and even like Joe Mm,
I
he
saw,
doesn't
we
have
saw,
that thing.
he doesn't have the Captain America face. I saw, because let's be honest, his acting in Camp Rock was not stellar. So what makes you
Right.
think you can carry a whole Marvel universe? But it was like John Krasinski, Alexander Skarsgård, I forget who else.
John
But other
Krasinski, though.
John, I mean, part of it, I feel like there was something like he mentioned it recently, like how like he didn't get the part, but he was able to do like other things. Like he wouldn't have been able to finish The Office if he had done Captain America. So, which The Office alone put him at legend status.
I mean, I've seen a few episodes of that Jack Ryan show that he's in, and it's more of like a serious role. And like, I was like, well, yeah, I could see him being Captain America, but I don't think anyone will ever beat out Chris Evans.
No, it's one of those things like, and people, it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see if because Spider-Man and Batman and Superman have been recast God knows how many times, and like people kind of get their taste at it. And I like honestly, I think the one thing, like, I don't see anybody else being Iron Man. Like, that's Robert Downey Jr. I don't see anybody else coming close to being a Tony Stark.
No.
And I feel like some people probably feel that way about certain people, about like Bruce Wayne or Clark Kent, but like Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark. Like, I just, why would you even try to give somebody else a bite at it? I don't know.
It doesn't work. And the thing is too, I feel like that with Spider-Man, like I think Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man out of all of them. I mean, you got the original, Tobey Maguire is he's the OG, and like I respect that. And I grew up with those movies,
Right.
Andrew Garfield, he was just cute to look at, but like not a very good Spider-Man. And then Tom Holland came in and he was like, I think he was like 17 when he started filming as Peter Parker. So like it worked because he was a kid.
Right.
And so I was like, you know what? I like this.
Exactly.
And this dynamic with Robert Downey Jr. is so good. Like the father-son relationship they have.
My eyes. Oh my God. They make me cry.
Everything is so good. And I'm so excited for the new Spider-Man movie to come out. I think it comes out this year at some point. So
I'm ready. I'm disappointed. I wish Black Widow came out like 4 years ago. Like it just feels like
so long for this movie.
I know. And I'm like, why did you give us Black? I get it. I get why. Like, not why, I don't really get why, but like I'm excited for it. I'm still gonna watch it. Like I'm ready, but like I just wish we got it like not knowing Endgame. I feel like she deserved better. Like so many times we want to know about the origin story, like everything, like all she's been through, like the fact that she thinks she's a mom. Like you put so much into her story, and she didn't even have her own movie for the longest time.
I know. I wanted a Black Widow movie from the second I saw the first Avengers. I was like, this woman needs to be like, with everything that she's gone through, like it's going to be great. But I mean, they're finally putting it out. It's coming out on my birthday this year. So like, I'm kind of stoked.
Oh, there you go.
It's probably going to be like my birthday thing. I'll probably the first time I go to the movies in like 2 years.
I was gonna say, is it in the theaters?
They're saying it. I mean, it also depends on where you live and if the
true
up or not, but we'll see.
But either that or I'll pay for it on Disney Plus. I don't care.
But yeah, I will. I would pay for those exclusive, when they put those stuff out.
Absolutely.
But we have gone on a Marvel tangent, and which is totally fine. I love talking Marvel stuff, but let's wrap up this interview. Annie, thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you let everyone know where they can find your podcast, your radio stuff, you on social media?
Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, this was a blast. I always love talking sports, even better when we can tie in other things as well. You can find me on social media at Sweet Annie OD on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, podcast, OD on Sports, wherever podcasts are streamed, radio 1015 KOCI in Orange County, but you can also listen to it online every Sunday, 3 to 5. And then my sports net appearances are just kind of sparing, but I always tweet them out. I always try to give as much heads up notice as I can. But yeah, if you ever want to talk sports or talk Marvel, talk whatever, I'm your girl. I'm always down for a good conversation. So I've had so much fun talking to you, Sam. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, thank you so much for coming on. This was a blast. I had a great time. And everyone, we are going to go back to our regular scheduled podcast programming. I know one of the best decisions I've ever made was to start this podcast. And I'm sure some of you have thought about starting one as well. But the question is always, where do you start? Buzzsprout is the best and easiest way to start your own professional podcast. They've already helped over 100,000 people launch their own podcast, including myself. They can get your podcast on every major podcasting platform. They provide you with your very own podcasting website, audio players to drop in other websites, detailed analytics, tools to promote your episodes, and so much more. Buzzsprout also publishes new blog posts, podcast episodes, and YouTube videos every week. To start your very own podcast and get a free, yes, a free $20 Amazon gift card, click the link in the show notes. Buzzsprout will know that you were sent by me, the girl who talks sports, and help support the show. Buzzsprout, the easiest way to start a podcast. Alrighty, everyone. So that was our interview with Annie. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I had a blast talking about stuff with her. It was so much fun, and I'm so excited for what we can do in the future together. So I think that this is like our longest episode like to date. We have never reached the 2-hour mark before, but we are dangerously close. And so with that in mind, I'm going to give you our feel-good story. Why can't I talk today? I don't understand. Feel-good story / tweet of the week. And because they kind of like go in with one another, and we will wrap our show up. So our feel-good story / tweet of the week this week is coming from presumably first pick of the draft, Trevor Lawrence. And if you guys, like, I don't know, like if you don't go on Instagram or anything, he just got married to his fiancée Marissa, and pictures are gorgeous, so beautiful, and like I was obsessed with everything that was posted about it. Fantastic. But Trevor Lawrence tweeted out, "Thank you to the Jaguar fans. I really appreciate the wedding gifts and donations for charities of our choice." So basically, yeah, so the Jaguars fans gave him wedding gifts and did all this stuff for him, which was so nice. But then it goes on. He says, "In addition to the donations, Marissa and I will also be donating $20,000 to charities in Jacksonville. Thanks again. We hope to be a part of your community soon." So there you go. There was a wedding. Jags fans who are, looking at their presumable quarterback for the future are like, you know what, we're going to get him some gifts. So they get some gifts for him for his wedding. And the charity thing is so nice. And now he's donating $20,000 more to charity in Jacksonville, his presumed home, which, let's be real. He's going to be the first pick of the draft. So that is just so sweet. And that is our feel-good story / tweet of the week for this week. And friends, that is going to do it for our show this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on all podcasting platforms and leave a review. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, which again, thank you guys so much for getting us to 100 subscribers. It really means the world to me. I didn't think that anyone would even know me or subscribe to the YouTube channel at all, but you did, and I really appreciate it. So make sure that you go and subscribe to there, like, comment on the video, turn on notifications, and don't forget to follow us on social media at TGWTS Podcast on both Twitter and on Instagram. I hope you guys all have a fun, fantastic, sports-filled day, and I will see you guys all next week. Bye!